Welcome, Rick. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and share a little bit about what you do.
Indeed. Thank you for having me on, Dr. Gleb. So, my name is Rick or Ricardo Madan. If you speak Spanish, I've been in the technology industry for almost 27 years, and currently I am very blessed to take care of and support TGS globally. TGS is TEKsystems Global Services, and we are a global system integrator, full stack system integrator, technology professional services, technology consulting organization, and especially for the purpose of today's conversation, it's probably germane to know that we have been implicitly tied very closely, very strategically aligned to platforms and hyperscalers such as AWS, Google Cloud, Red Hat OpenShift, Microsoft, ServiceNow, can go on, but those have been some of the principal
Mhm.
platforms and venues by which a lot of Gen AI is happening, by which a lot of
Mhm.
AI consumption is really taking place across the industry. And on top of those platforms, we do things like author accelerators and repurpose code bases and find ways to really make large language models or smaller models and really
Mhm.
just AI models applicable to the enterprise, applicable to real world use. And yeah, been looking forward to the convo today as a result, Dr. Gleb.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about the history of tech systems and how it came to start adopting generative AI. Like, what's your journey been like?
Yeah, our journey for to in the interest of time, I could probably take this back about, let's say, 8 years.
Mhm.
And that's in earnest when our AI journey started. And I'll try not to conflate AI and automation because a lot of good
Yes.
AI will beget automation, but those two and enterprise computing usually inhabit their own principal sovereign
Mhm.
spaces. So I'll really try to keep it to an applicable, applied AI, real world kind of AI sort
Mhm.
of timeline here. But in earnest, about 8 years ago, we were working with a big oil and gas customer, and they're based in Texas. Big surprise. This is a North American one, by the way, and we operate globally. But I'll try to pinpoint locale here because I know you've got a global audience, Dr. Gleb.
Sure.
But working with an oil and gas, big global oil and gas customer, and the arm that we were working with was their exploration division,
Mhm.
and they invested millions of dollars every year in these deep sea sensors that would kind of tell you, hey, where the wells are and the drilling, and what kind of part of their region of, like, let's say the Gulf of Mexico, for example, is ripe to be speculative for some of their exploration pursuits. And these deep sea sensors were really tough to maintain. And typically, what would happen is that end of life would occur because they would get hit by trawlers, or the waves would just beat
Mhm.
these things, or they would become compromised. And whether it was entropy or rust, something would take hold, and their tens of $1 million worth
Mhm.
of investment on a given sensor would go away.
Mhm.
So having a relationship with this organization, knowing their CTO at the time very well, and having repurposed
Mhm.
a lot of, at the time, like our ML frameworks to kind of help automate different business processes, he put forth the problem to us and was like, hey, what can you do here? What, I've got all this investment in this infrastructure, but it's going away. What can you do? So long story short, that's when we really started to look at some of these ML models that we had put in place before. And this was around the same
Mhm.
time that, like, IoT was really starting to get production oriented at scale for the enterprise. So we were able to really build some cool AI models around predictability for end of
Mhm.
life for these sensors. So before they completely went defunct, we could anticipate, hey, these in this region or in this device, based on history, based on currents, based on all kinds
Mhm.
of data and telemetry that we were able to pull back in off of our little kind of spheres of data computing, we were able to predict when to service, when to maintain, when to have a
Mhm.
little health check on these devices. And we saved them tens of millions of dollars really over the course of what was like a 3 year engagement just for this one little piece of computing on our end. And then that graduated. We were able to take a lot of those lessons learned, take a lot of those AI frameworks that we built,
Hmm.
and they really ran hand in hand with data. And that's another symbiotic relationship that I'm sure we'll uncover a little bit more about,
Sure.
and really the preeminence of data in this day and age to make generative AI work and work well. But we took that and went to some of our more forward-thinking customers, like in the Bay
Mm.
Area, for example, Palo Alto, San Jose, Santa Clara, and have a really special relationship with a company called Lumentum. And at the time, their CTO, another very forward-thinking individual, is like, hey, we've got issues in our manufacturing process for wafer production. And if anybody doesn't know Lumentum, they manufactured the facial recognition chips
Mm.
for iPhones. What is it? No, I've got Android and iPhone, but for iPhones, they at the time were the exclusive chip producer
Mm.
for that functionality, for facial reco functionality, and with a great manufacturing process. However, because it's so specialized, and we are talking about silicon, and we are talking about semiconductors, there's a lot of microscience that. Oh, I think I lost you. You still
No.
there? All right, I got you back. I lost you for a hot second. But anyway, there's a lot of science that can go bad in your manufacturing
Hmm.
organization. So, with a lot of this reuse of frameworks that we were able to genericize for them, we
Mm.
were able to predict. And again, this is still, let's just say, kind of rules-based AI.
Yeah.
Not quite yet generative, not
It's machine
quite.
learning.
Yeah, exactly. So, not quite yet goal-oriented or probabilistic.
Mm.
This is more deterministic AI. And we were able to start predicting, down to very fine-grained computation, like where the bottlenecks were, where the
Mhm.
QA process on wafers needed to get beefed up, and we were able to optimize that whole process for them. So those are two very kind of device and material
Mhm.
centric sort of AI use cases. But then it just took off for us. Then
Okay.
those lessons learned, with a lot of the IP that we authored, we were able to
Mm.
make a splash in areas like fraud detection and anticipation
Mm.
across financial services customers, AP and account payable type enterprise functions for healthcare providers and claims providers. It evolved into building our first version and suite and generation of chatbots that we started to
Mm.
apply hand in hand with awesome partners like Google Cloud, started to apply to big global telecommunications and telco
Mhm.
companies, primarily for contact center support type functions initially on platforms like CCAIP for Google Cloud. That's our contact center AI platform, but then also like Connect for AWS, but really
Mhm.
starting to short circuit and shortcut a lot of what used to be very manual, very labor intensive customer service, level one, level two type functions out there. A lot of
Mhm.
phone work, a lot of global agents, and not always a lot of resolution or high CX,
Mm.
not high customer experience
Yeah.
from those experiences. So really able now to kind of platformize our IP and our
Mhm.
experience, and do it with some of these awesome big hyperscaler partners that we've got en masse and at scale. And then that takes us to today. This all
Yeah.
again is kind of very deterministic, very rule based. Kind of follows a flow and an order. But now enter generative AI, November 2023 in earnest, let's say, and the game has changed, and we've
Yeah.
started to see what happens in a more kind of goal-oriented sort of outcome
Mhm.
when you can just crunch at scale and compute at scale and analyze and rinse data insights at scale across an entity that's going to be way more decisive, that's going to be way more autonomous in its outputs for you, even before we get to agentic AI, and it's both exciting and scary in equal measure.
Mm.
So some of those deterministic platforms that we were able to enhance, like CCAI, for example, over the last 12 months, we've been able to back end them with models like Gemini and cut down deployment costs by 50%
Oh, wow.
and get our tuning for driving value out of chat histories a lot more accurately to be able to take care of customer support concerns a lot quicker. So that is the cool thing for us. But although these are very kind of well applied and reused business cases, I could probably say, Dr. Gleb, that most of at least what we hear, what I hear out there in the market is hype and a lot of rhetoric, especially around agentic computing right now.
Sure.
But that's just a little bit. I hope you know what, I
Yeah.
know I didn't do our teams justice. We've got just an incredible global team, just some of the most dedicated architects, engineers, and leaders that anybody would ever have the great opportunity to work with. So I'm not really doing them justice on that timeline, but that, to answer your question, is, again, in the interest of time, a little bit of a preview as to what our AI journey has been to date, where we can start to now talk about some of the more agentic and goal-oriented systems that we're starting to produce and put together for our customers.
Yeah, so let's talk about doing more justice for them by giving a comparison of a project that you did using machine learning, kind of some of the traditional predictive modeling earlier onward, and a similar project, if you have a similar project that you used more modern generative AI systems. So you can do it sanitized so that you can think about a specific example. You can do it for the same company or for a different company. Tell me about how it looks different and how the modern tools with AI are better, more effective, like on the business outcomes and productivity, costs, and so on.
An immediate retail customer comes to mind, global retail customer, that in the old sort of, strict kind of capture, playback, ML prediction kind of format, we were able to build some really cool search engine optimization for user experience and specific CX on transaction in their online retail, their online presence. So anybody who was, like, let's just say, buying a shirt, you could size it a certain way, you could ship it a certain way, you could pick a certain color, and based on your history, it could sort of kind of determine what to recommend and what other sort of bells and whistles in your experience, during that user session or during that transaction, you would want. And it worked great. But now enter the world of agent applicability. We've been tasked to kind of take that older, and I hate to say legacy, because this is stuff, Dr. Gleb, that we authored like 9 months ago, but stuff is moving pretty fast. So 9 months
Yep.
ago, and now it's legacy. But so we were tasked to really look, and this comes from a lot of our engineers globally right now, and especially some of our innovation centers in India in particular, mixing with what we do in North America, what we do in continental Europe, mainland Europe, UK. So tasked with taking that 9-month-old legacy sort of format and saying, hey, if we could start to introduce agents that do things that didn't really exist a year ago in mass like they do now, like a lot of fraud happening as a result and security vulnerability happening as a result of your online transaction behavior. If we could have like a security agent, and if we could have maybe like a transaction agent on top of that too, to kind of work with one another, could we reduce fraud? Because this retailer and this merchant has had a lot of fraud issues over the years. So could we start to reduce some of the behavior that our agent could detect as anomalous or an aberration or something, at least to probably shut down or at least get back to that customer post-transaction to ensure that they are who they say they were, and this is something that they approved, this transaction was something that they approved, etc. And just in version 1 of this capability, I was like, wow, this really works. But so CX goes up. We do a lot of CSAT type scoring for our work, and it's right now based on an NPS. You've probably heard of the Net Promoter Score model, where anything over 70% is like world class. and we're regularly getting 90% plus
Wow.
feedback on some of this cool new agentic
Nice.
uh, feature functionality sets. But at the same time, I will tell you, Dr. Gleb, that if the old adage was you have to spend money to make money, right now, what we're trying to really balance is spending money to save money.
Hmm.
Because there is, whether it's enterprises, whether it's public sector, there is a little bit of a missing or a missed expectation that the minute you
Hmm.
introduce an agent to your enterprise, or the minute you bring in generative AI, or the minute you tune a model to take advantage of your corpus of data a little bit better, you're immediately going to become more efficient, immediately going to cut
Hmm.
expenses, immediately going to realize some massively
Hmm.
vast output to whatever it is you're trying to do as a business, and that's just not true. It's not
Hmm.
immediate. If you want those efficiencies and you want to save money and you want to innovate and you want to do all these things, you got to spend a little bit first on
Hmm.
integration. You have to
Sure.
spend on data testing. You got to spend on model tuning and training. You got to spend
Hmm.
on your reinforced learning from human feedback and A/B testing. There are a lot of things you got to do to make either those models work for you or make these agents work for you
Hmm.
on top of your either existing or new infrastructure. So there is still a lot of spending going on, and we haven't even touched compute and what's happening in data centers and what's happening behind
Hmm.
the scene there.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of investment. So to go back to your
Hmm.
question, still trying to do justice to those engineers, but also trying to bring a little bit of light to some of the
Hmm.
misnomers out there right now in the public forum.
Thank you. Definitely important to help people have a clear idea. So let's say somebody comes to you and they say, we want to do a project. And how would you start? Like, walk me through all the steps of a project from the initiation to the completion, including getting everything from getting buy-in from stakeholders to getting your team together to thinking about who needs to be the representatives on the other side of the team. Let's say describe the kind of project that you did for that retailer. What did you do? What would you need to do? So how would executive who is thinking about this should they start thinking about it? I know I have a lot of clients who they are asking about generative AI adoption and help. What should I tell them about all the steps? And I have my own answers, but I'm curious from your perspective, what are
Yeah.
the steps that you would recommend for them to think about?
Yeah, I'll try to talk about the consciousness of that conversation first. To
Mhm.
me, that is more interesting than the steps. I'm happy to talk about the many steps, but this may turn into a very academic conversation. So I'll start with consciousness. But it all for us pivots on what our customer is trying to achieve and
Mhm.
what sorts of pressures they might be under right now, what sorts of opportunities or markets they're looking to enter into. So if we
Mhm.
talked about just this retailer, for example, they're facing massive supply chain vulnerabilities and
Mhm.
risks right now due to inflation. A lot of their products that they're looking to repackage and vend, that's gone way up. So their margins have shrunk. They've got shareholders that are asking questions. They've got equity
Mhm.
analysts that are saying weird things and asking uncomfortable questions during
Mhm.
earnings calls. So all of these things, and they're not alone. And it's not just a retail
Sure.
thing. That we could probably look at the entire global industrial strength business sector all in, and there's
Mhm.
different flavors of that sort of sequence going on. So the consciousness comes to how can we help you here?
Mhm.
And I really start to pay attention for how technical the conversations get when we ask questions like, what are we looking to achieve? Because
Mhm.
when we start to hear things like, well, we want to do AI, or we want adoption, or we want native services on this hyperscaler, or native services on that platform, like already that's where we can tell that this customer's probably reading a lot of headlines, and they've got a
Mhm.
lot of ISV and software vendors and platform vendors in their offices all
Mhm.
day long, and they're,
Yeah.
whether they acknowledge it or not, they're subliminally or subconsciously trying to rationalize all of those
Mhm.
signals. So we try to put all of that away, and I'm not saying that a lot of these crazy promises out there about automation, AI, et cetera, aren't great, but most of them aren't very complete, and some of them
Sure.
are patently untrue. Um, and I can probably talk to you about which ones we think are untrue right now.
Mhm.
So our first thing before we go to steps for qualification is really just try to understand what are you trying to
Mm.
achieve and make it not a technical thing, at least for the first part of the conversation, but a customer thing. Is
Mhm.
it greater satisfaction that you're looking to drive across your clientele or your users? If so, how are you measuring that? And what does success look like to you in that measurement? You know, is it an
Mhm.
NPS thing? Is it feedback survey, online feedback survey? Is it general sentiment? Is it going out and reading all of and trolling and parsing all of the legions of comments
Mhm.
that you've got across social? Like, what
Mm.
is it? How do we define success? And usually it's a combination of all of those things. And in some way, shape, or form, which is another thing that we do in terms of like data ingestion and insight generation. Um, but if it's a cost thing, because right now, let's face it, Dr. Gleb, the world economy is in a weird place.
Yeah.
And right when we thought it was maybe getting a little sunnier out there in terms of inflation, stuff got weird again. So it invariably turns into some kind of efficiency conversation. So if it is efficiency, where? And we don't just want to talk about velocity or paring down systems. We want to talk about specifically where do
Mhm.
you have financial overruns, specifically where is
Mhm.
your overhead problematic right now, specifically what kind of benchmarks from a previous era of operations do you feel that you ran at a good run rate, ran at a good level, where your internal ratios and your balances for cost to productivity, or again whatever you're measuring it on, when were they healthy? Like, we really start to get forensic,
Mhm.
Dr. Gleb, in those conversations when it becomes a cost type of thing. And this is not new gospel. This is what all
Sure.
the consulting organizations do. The big three kind of grow up in MBA programs, learning to talk and think this way. So that part is not
Mhm.
kind of new at all. But merging that adaptably and quickly and fluidly with an actual technology solution and learning how to do
Mhm.
it in a lean way, and going from what we used to call MVP, your minimal viable product,
Yeah.
and right now we're going from MVP to like agents overnight now, so that's kind of
Mhm.
changing. But doing something in a lean way where you can grow off of a proof of concept, put
Mhm.
feathers in the cap of your customer, prove out your thesis, prove out your theorem for cost saves or customer satisfaction or risk mitigation or revenue generation, whatever that real business goal is. And if you can do that quickly by virtue of kind of the conversation and the
Mhm.
qualifying steps and all of that, and get to kind of eyes on glass and hands on keyboards in a way that matters. And we
Mhm.
set up toll gates to ensure that it matters quickly, and we're not just kind of
Mhm.
coding to nowhere or putting in methodologies to nowhere, which happens a lot in our industry. But the quicker that we can do that, the better off we know we're going to be.
Mhm.
And we just get scientific about it, because we've got
Yeah.
a lot of steps across the way of engagement with our customers to ensure that we keep that true north center of frame for us. So if it was lowering
Mhm.
costs, how are we doing with that? And let's prove it, so that our words to them don't become propaganda over time. So we
Mhm.
love to be kept honest and held honest by our customers. And again, there's some science to the way we do that, but to me, the consciousness of that matter is what matters most. No pun intended.
Okay, that's fair enough. So you got the consciousness figured out. Now, when you're thinking about the implementation and the steps there, what I've seen the biggest challenges, and I'll tell you, I've seen challenges in psychological resistance from employees. I've seen challenges in structure from the organizations that is not well adapted for generative AI integration. I've seen, of course, technical adoption challenges with their legacy systems, and I've seen risks around data security, privacy, bias, so various risks. That's kind of the four frameworks that I think about: psychological resistance, technical obstacles, structural obstacles, and risks. And
Yep.
I'm curious about your frame, if I'm missing anything, I'm curious about what frameworks you're thinking about in terms of implementation. And if we're thinking along the same lines, go over those four frameworks and how you address each one in turn.
I think I'm going to repackage your frameworks, Gleb, and just use them. It's very coherent and concise, all four. But we might use different words. So, like, let's talk
Sure.
about psychological resistance, for example. So we talk a lot about, and you've heard OCM. You do OCM, organizational change management. But we talk a lot about emotional change management, ECM,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to trying to lower that psychological resistance and try to gain adoption. And if we're keeping in line with that kind of start small and nimbly kind of iterate your way up sort of
Mm-hmm.
agile ethos that we talk about a lot and deliver a lot, that emotional change management almost becomes like a frog boiling for the contrarians inside the organization. But like, as opposed to yourself, I don't have psychology degrees, but oh my goodness, my friend, like so much of what system integrators
Yeah.
like myself do really is just try to understand those
Mm-hmm.
goals, dreams, desires, biases, and just ideas in our audience, because it is we work with a rich panoply of personalities, stakeholders, C-level and otherwise. And if we just talk about that emotional change management right now,
Mm-hmm.
these generative topics and generative conversations, the fact that they run hand in hand with a lot of traditional job functions changing,
Yeah.
a lot of them potentially going extinct, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of applications. This might dovetail into the technical part of your four-step methodology, or four-component methodology. There's a lot of pride and legacy applications
Mm-hmm.
that made certain careers, that won
Mm-hmm.
certain awards, publicly facing, that companies still hang on to. So there's so much of that heart and mind and soul that we're trying to understand and we're trying to rationalize. And but with emotional change management, like if we resistance is usually exposed to us by a project plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're red, yellow, green, if we're yellow or red on any deliverables, milestones, etc., and we can trace that back to, well, we're not getting the buy-in that was pre-agreed to in launch and kickoff. We're not getting the cooperation by the business, or another stakeholder came in and is now sitting on top of who was our customer, and there's another
Mm-hmm.
agenda and something. And these things all happen because
Yeah.
businesses are like people; they're very fluid and things change. But the understanding the emotions behind the velocity of that change and of that adoption, that's really where we try to go.
Mm-hmm.
So any blockers, any barriers to that, and then sometimes the converse of that, we could say, if people are a little too eager and they're and they're not guarded enough
Mm.
about either their data or their app estate
That's
or
the
whatever, it's like, well,
risks.
we've got to
That's the
double
risks.
click. And yeah, exactly. What's going on there? Do they have governance? Do they not? Like, what else is in this bag of tricks? And I say this respectfully and I say it lovingly, because really, to us, our customers and our partners, they're so diverse internally, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like one. Even though companies like ours kind of live by repeatability, being able to take a solution, a pattern, or idea, and try to repeat that and do it at scale, like that's just
Mm-hmm.
the SI model in short. Even though that is the goal, doing that inside customer environments that are like a snowflake fingerprint sort of vibe, where every single one is going to be different and it's going to be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I love. That gives me energy,
Mm-hmm.
because no opportunity is going to be the same, and better, no problem is going to be the same really either. And it just allows us to bring more of that
Mm-hmm.
humanity into respecting those environments, respecting those stakeholders a certain way, and not try to treat the human element and the psyche element as like a pattern, because it is engineers, we can definitely start to get really binary
Mm-hmm.
about stuff, but keeping that human difference, that
Mm-hmm.
specialness, that organizational uniqueness at the fore when we're trying to tackle things
Mm-hmm.
like psychological resistance, technology dominion that we have to drive adoption through, et cetera. That all kind of comes into it, and that's heart and mind, as you know. That is really kind of
Absolutely.
feely EQ, heart and mind stuff, not just mind stuff. And I love that because I think in our industry and technology, we often get a bad rap for just being a bunch of unempathetic IQ people.
Mhm.
And it's not true. I hate that lie. It's a big lie. And we hate it. But anyway.
So let's talk a little bit about the structure and the risks. We talk about the resistance and the technical, but let's talk about the technical integration. Let's talk about what kind of structure your customer should set up to effectively integrate generative AI. I often when I work with clients, I set up cross-functional committees that have
Mm-hmm.
folks from IT, folks from HR, folks from operations to make sure that there's a lot of buy-in across the organization, people who are excited about generative AI adoption. So I'm curious what you do. And then let's talk about the risks of integrating generative AI. You mentioned it briefly, like data and privacy, but let's go into that in more depth. So talk a little bit about the structure that's needed and the risks that need to be addressed.
Now, I love this conversation, and you already provided a pretty good outline and straw man, generally speaking, to how these cross-functional coalitions, committees, and
Mhm.
stakeholder groups come together because AI affects everybody. The data belongs to everyone. Everyone
Mhm.
essentially is a data owner and a data steward across a given enterprise now. And the minute that you're going to try to monetize somebody's data, or you're going to try to audit someone's data, or you're going to try to, run analytics at scale over somebody's data, you've got that cross-functional team that needs to understand, what the
Mhm.
outputs, what the consequences, what the downstream repercussions are. So that there's nothing new in the structure to that, I would say, but I would submit that, and this is like dog food moments for us too, because as we start to not just consult and sell and solution and architect and deploy generative technology for our customers, Dr. Gleb, but as we consume and buy and run our own consumption as a result
Mhm.
of AI, we've had to drink this champagne and eat this dog food to audit ourselves and set up our own value system around AI and what we're trying to
Mhm.
avoid, what we're trying to embrace. So in that structure, having a very separated ethics and kind of firewalled ethics function
Mhm.
is key for me. And it's key for us. And when I say separate, like that cannot be an entity that sits in the line of business. It can't be
Mhm.
your CIO, CTO, because he or her are just they're going to be biased. They live in the enabler piece of
Yeah.
that in technology. So it really can't be any of those folks. It's got to be an outside vested interest in that same organization by and large.
Mhm.
And we're fortunate at TEKsystems that our general counsel and his team are kind of closet AI nerds.
Hmm.
So they they were already kind of downstream with us. They followed a lot of the bill activity that's been going on for the last
Huh.
couple of years. They followed a lot of the bias avoidance, bias mitigation
Mhm.
actions out there, like that first one in New York with that recruiting bill that was passed. If any, like recruiting tools, using generative technology, were producing recommendations that followed a bias pattern,
Mhm.
that you clamp down on that. So we're very, very fortunate that our GC and his team, just full of wonderful people, they were that natural fit for
Mhm.
us. Now, I don't recommend that for all organizations because sometimes that legal group, even though by nature they can do audit, things like audit and governance naturally, functionally speaking, it may not work. And functionally speaking, they might be too tied to your revenue generation activities.
Mhm.
Like if you're selling securities, for example, they might be a little too close to your end
Mhm.
product to effectively govern how AI is going to be consumed inside the organization. That's just our take. But we're fortunate to have them run hand in hand with HR, have them run hand in hand with
Mhm.
finance, have them run hand in hand with the business, with our technology organization. That structure has worked out great for us because we've got certainly an internal advocate, but also an internal truth teller.
Mm.
to us. And that our legal group is the one actually that came up with our value system.
Huh.
And it's very easy to memorize. Just think of FATE, FATE,
Mhm.
and very simply, it's be fair, be oh my gosh, I'm going to forget it right now. Be fair, be accountable, be transparent, and be ethical. Yeah, I thought A was accessible for a second, but that was another thing that I was saying. So accountable. So like be fair, for example, that's where
Mhm.
we handle our bias seeking, where we just
Mm.
want to be bloodhounds for any biases that we
Mm.
might be unintendedly producing inside
Mhm.
of an output, inside of a function. So we'll keep on the legal track for a second. We've got some go-to tools that are helping with things like redactions and redlining and document review, contract review,
Mhm.
statement of work review. We've even produced our own accelerator called IDP, Intelligent Doc Processing Accelerator, which is all AI based. It's multi-platform, like
Mhm.
we're deploying out on AWS, on Google Cloud. It's wonderful.
Mhm.
But uh, if we just talked about that use case for a second, we've
Mhm.
got to make sure that when we've got something simple, summarization features, or we've got like patterns of red lines, if certain names are being redlined and or redacted that might sound
Mm.
like different, like my name is Ricardo Madan. If we're talking about
Mm.
a customer in the Midwest or something, that name might like cause a flag for
Yeah.
some reason. So we really have to
Mm.
scrub what's happening in terms of outputs, and then we can go back in and retrain. So we've
Mhm.
got these tools and these systems. We can go back in and unflag and have a different guardrail that we're able to implement. But all
Mhm.
of that comes by virtue of really having these internal constituent departments that are kind of helping you run things like just trust on what it
Mhm.
is that you're getting out of these systems. So I think structurally that that internal, again, some people don't like the word auditor, they don't like the word governor,
Mhm.
but that internal firewalled
Yeah.
governance function just has to
Mhm.
exist. And if you don't have that, there are companies out there like Holistic AI, for example. There are a lot like that. That's become like a cottage industry, just exploding, as you've probably seen the
Mhm.
last couple of years, of organizations that will specialize in helping you
Mhm.
produce the right guardrails, helping you really audit and create an audit
Mhm.
policy, because policy is just going to continue to evolve. It
Yeah.
feels like on what's ethical AI and what's not, and what's risky and what's not.
Mhm.
And we've even seen some of the big language model providers out there kind of shift shift gears in the
Mm.
last, being like ultra conservative up front, like Sam Altman, for example, like, oh, we need to watchdog ourselves and all that. And now it's
Mm.
kind of like, nah,
Yep.
we're going to be a
We're
public,
good.
we're going to go from, a non-for-profit to now we're going to scale and we're going to make money and we got an
Mm.
AI builder and let's go. So I feel that it's going to be a little bit of a moving target, honestly, Dr. Gleb. But that firewalled, accountable function to govern, it's got to happen structurally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. This has been really helpful. Now, as we finish up, what are you thinking will be the future of generative AI in the next couple of years? You've talked about the hype now. You can mention what you think is the hypey things now, but what do you think will happen in the next couple of years that will not be so hypey?
I'd like to talk about first maybe what I hope.
Yes.
And what I hope, and I left a comment on LinkedIn. I forget who it was that put the post out. If I know you, you're going to go find it. So let me try to be precise. It was and I can send it to you afterward. It was a
Mhm.
gentleman who runs a company. He's a techie guy. He runs, I think, a VC and a technology startup in France. And he had a really compelling little post. And normally I don't talk about posts. I'd like to talk about papers and something a little bit more encyclopedic. But hey, you do a lot on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I'm gonna talk about that for a second. So he had a
Sure.
post, and he talked about, I think it was Klarna, the Swedish
Pay.
software
Yeah.
e-commerce company,
Yeah.
and it was. I think he was talking about Klarna's CEO, and they're brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant company, good reputation. They've got like tens of thousands of customers overnight. They do good things. They do good stuff. Um, it seems like they fell into the temptation, though, of being a little too heady around the fact that they've got agents now and they don't need humans.
Mm.
And that is, it's a big statement, but a lot of leaders are saying similar things. And it's
Hmm.
a little bit irresponsible. Because right now we've got this global economy that really appends to high tech more than it ever has before.
Hmm.
And a lot of these CEOs and these chief architects, they're viewed rightly or wrongly as like social luminaries and
Yeah.
economic luminaries and policy luminaries. Some are physically now policy
Yes.
luminaries working in the government.
Yep.
So when they say things, it becomes normalized and
Hmm.
people will make decisions and it'll affect psyche. It'll, as you know way better than I, it'll
Yeah.
affect behaviors, it'll affect decisions, and we're seeing it affect mental health.
Hmm. Hmm.
And part of the organization that I'm blessed to work for also does human capital management. So
Hmm.
they go out, TEKsystems, our talent development, staffing, and recruiting company, is the largest IT staff provider and talent provider on the planet. They're
Mm.
talking to thousands of employees now proactively who are coming to them and saying, hey, our CEO is making all these claims out there that they've got agents now and they don't need humans. And it
Mm.
seems like there's an enmity and a hostility towards humans, and I don't feel
Mm.
safe. And the people that are saying that they don't feel safe, Dr. Gleb, a lot of them, oh my goodness, they are these like canonized architects, developers, engineers,
Mm.
system folks, analysts, leaders, and all of a sudden they don't feel safe because of these
Mm.
claims that are kind
Mm.
of, let's just say it, irresponsibly happening out
Mhm.
there. So back to the post. So this individual that wrote the post kind of drew the dichotomy of just a couple months ago, there was a lot of big speech around like, we got agents, we don't need people. And I think he mentioned something else about another startup that got to like $1 billion valuation saying I can run the $1 billion company on agents and no humans.
Mm.
And now that's being repealed, and now they're seeing that customer service has dipped, revenue has dipped. You know, a lot of things now have turned into bad business results after they expunge themselves, very misguidedly of their humans and of their people. And now they're like, wait, hold on, we were just
Mm.
kidding. We actually do need people, and agents and generative AI and agentic AI, is now going to live harmoniously with the
Mm.
humans and with the people. So back to your question, that's my hope, is that we can just bring more
Mhm.
sanity back in the narrative, more
Mm.
sanity back into the conversation, because there's nothing, and again, maybe I'm going to be very naive here to you. You tell me, there's nothing that really feels that you could ever build in a lab or otherwise that's going to compete with the specialness of the human condition.
Mhm.
What we have inside of us, our soul and our spirit. I'm sorry, there's no code that can be comparable to that, but there is code that can be a companion, that could be
Mhm.
an augment, that could be an accelerator to those things. So my hope is that we can kind of bring back the import and the specialness
Mm.
of the human condition here, my brother. That is,
Mhm.
and
Good.
that's what I hope.
Yeah, it's a good hope. It's a good hope. I think there are a number of leaders who don't share that hope, who are more like the Klarna CEO, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's a
Yeah, but
good
hey, it
sentiment.
sounds like he changed his tune. So
Good.
maybe now he's going through his own Damascene conversion. But we'll see. But that's my hope. And I'm not. There's reason behind a lot of these big claims
Hmm.
right now. These same companies are looking at all of this global volatility, and they're like, oh,
Sure.
we better turn the PR fire hose on if we
Mm.
want to really protect and instantiate our place in the market, because
Mhm.
it is easier to spin up ISVs and competitive models. It is so easy to spin companies up overnight right now,
Mhm.
and even though VC is a little more constrained than it was 3 years ago, it is easier to spin
Sure.
up competitors, and nobody wants to be the next. And all the stories, the next Blockbuster, the next
Yeah.
IBM, the next, fill in the blank. Nobody wants to be the next one of those
Mhm.
organizations that become a little kind of like a fossil in their industry and gets snapped up by the next big fast disruptor. But I
Mhm.
think it's up to us to discern what's real disruption and what's just disruption theater. And that's,
Hmm.
that's our job.
I think that's a great message on which to end. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Rick. That was great.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Gleb. Thank you for having me.